here's what I tell my students. If you want to see what happens as we age, a great place, and it's a sad place, but hospital or kidney dialysis, just look at older individuals, and there's something you'll notice about everybody who ages not well. They're slow. And we know that sarcopenia, for lack of a better word, attacks type 2 muscle fibers. Those are the muscle fibers that atrophy the most. So if we can have people doing explosive jumps, push-ups where you're clapping, medicine ball throws, again, as soon as I'm done with my current program, I am going to make sure that I'm doing this stuff.
All right, team, it's Daine here, your host of the Industry Leader podcast, where I interview the best and the brightest in the world in lifestyle, nutrition, training, entrepreneurship, and business. And in today's episode, I have a very special guest. He's a business partner. He's a professor in sports science. He's one of the world's leading fitness experts. His name is Dr. Bill Campbell. And in today's episode, we deep dive on a bunch of different topics. We go into longevity, nutrition, the best exercise that you can do to extend your quality of life. We go into some projects that he's working on, what he values in life, and much more. So if you like the episode, click the link below, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy the show. I want to deep dive and just go straight into it, which actually the first topic I actually want to bring up today with you, mate, is actually the importance of education, right? I think you're someone that embodies that. You're, highly credentialed yourself as well. But talk to us a little bit about kind of your journey in the industry. Like if I was to look at Bill in 2003, right? So taking yourself back 20 years to now, like what role has education played in you going from where you were to where you are today?
So I'm gonna answer it in a way that may be a little shocking, or at least surprising. Education is vital, but education alone without application really leaves you wanting or lacking. So I would say the education, learning physiology, because in our field, in health and fitness, and let's just say, and that includes nutrition, you have to learn physiology. And one thing that I try to impress upon our students, and of course we do this in Physique Coaching Academy as well, is if you can understand metabolism and physiology, you have an answer or a mental process that can allow you to respond to any question. Somebody can throw 10 different supplements at you, or, hey, how would this program work, this training program? And you can always reverse engineer that into the body's physiology and say, okay, well, based on my knowledge on physiology, this supplement or this nutrition program, the body will respond or adapt to that this way. And there's no shortcut to education. No. Now, there is a shortcut in the terms of the courses and the high quality education that exists today that didn't exist before you were on the scene. So I know your company kind of pioneered this. So I appreciate
that. Just on a side note, like to come from you, who's obviously, been in the game a long time, that's always been my mission. Is I think I look at and say, like, when we were coming up in the industry in the early noughties, right? Like there wasn't really many options. So it's like, how can we create options for today's trainers? And we're doing that right now, obviously with Physique Coaching Academy, so that they don't have to necessarily waste as much time as we did.
Yes. Yeah. So I go back to your education. It's the foundation for everything you're going to do. But I would challenge anybody, because I know there's people out there, and I'm guilty of this too, not in fitness, but in other aspects, more like business stuff. You just keep learning and learning and learning. It's like, go train somebody. You cut your teeth. I mean, you did it. You were in the trenches for years, crafting and honing your skill. And then I know that, and then you got more into the business development, but it's the education, and then you got to apply it. Work with a human. Put your hands, put your hands on a human. Train them. Get their nutrition. Work with them on nutrition, and that's education in and of itself. You're going to learn, hey, how did they respond? How did they not respond? Was my communication effective? So, in summary, it's the foundation for everything that we're going to do in this space, but it can't be the only thing. You have to work with people with your knowledge.
I think that's something that gets maybe misconstrued by people who are proponents of evidence-based principles, right? Sometimes it's like they focus just specifically on that without the practical application. You know, even myself, you know, I ended up doing over 20,000 hands-on coaching sessions. And that in itself was like doing a doctorate in experience, right? Because like you're in there, you're coaching different body patterns, you're figuring out that this particular person's metabolism reacts differently to the other person's and stuff like that. What would you say, like, because I think one of the things I love about you is that you're very big on having the evidence-based as the foundation, but then practically applying it. Like, what would you say to a lot of coaches out there that are maybe too much stuck in academia, you know, to help them kind of get out of that and maybe just get more in the trenches?
Yeah, I mean, well, learning just to learn isn't serving anybody. And we're in this space to serve people, to help people. So, and I'm going to applaud anybody who's in evidence-based because it's a lot of work. It's hard to keep up in the science. It's hard to read research. And it's not a sexy way to go about fitness. I mean, I was just, you know, thinking today, like there's so many other areas that we could go in to get up to have a lot more followers, a lot more prestige, or not fake foul prestige. So evidence-based, I applaud anybody. But again, it's you take those guidelines. And then here's the funny thing. When you are evidence-based and you start working with people, what you get is results because somebody has put all of these principles to the test, literally in experiments. I mean, it's what I do every day. We do experiments and we say, this tends to work better than this. And then the students of evidence-based fitness can take that drastically or exponentially accelerate their learning curve and then apply it. And we all know the way that you get one client is to get results. And that one client becomes 2 and then 4 and then 8. And then before you know it, if this is your goal, you hiring an assistant coach and then a second coach, and then you're putting out your own program. So it's the knowledge, and then it gives you the success because it actually gives you the results because it's been tested in a research setting.
No, I love it. I love it. So talk to me then, like, obviously, you know, you're in a position and you have been for several years now where, you know, you have your own research lab, you're a professor at university, and, you know, you're the mentor. Talk to us, like, you know, for a young Bill Campbell, like, is there one person that stands out in your history that really kind of helped set you on your career path? I think, you know, I've discussed with you before that kind of North Star for me was meeting Charles Poliquin. Right.
Yes.
And kind of, you know, just kind of looking at where he was at and stuff that he was doing, it made me realize that I could do a lot more than I'd kind of set out to do. Right. So, like, have you had a person like that in your career that's really kind of been that catalyst for leveling up?
You know, I was asked this a couple months ago and I gave an answer on the spot. And since then, I've had time to think about it. And my answer is going to be the same. And I don't know, part of me wishes I had a better answer, or I wish I had an answer. I don't have, there's not one person that I can point to. Now, part of that may be, I'm the first person in my family to go to college, like to literally get a 4-year degree. Now, I went overboard and got a master's and PhD. So I didn't have anybody in my family or my upbringing that I could look up to in terms of, oh, they're in academia. Like nobody read books. You know, my parents were laborers. So that was just more, little bit more just, you know, surviving, so to speak.
Yeah.
As I got into academia, but now I'm an adult, and actually it's my second career. I used to be in sales and in merchandising in my earlier, you know, I was in my 20s. So I actually changed careers to pursue this. The people that I started looking up to at that point were the researchers, the scientists, and all of them were around in the area of sports nutrition. And it's funny, just a little nostalgia. I remember reading Charles Poliquin's book, The Arms Race.
I've got it. Yeah.
Big influence on me as well. I really tried to consume everything he put out. And then I'll never forget, I was at a conference, sports nutrition conference, got on the elevator, and there he was. So I met Charles on
with
the
his
elevator.
big arms.
Yes, big arms, not the tallest guy in the world. And I was just like, wow. I just remember like, ooh, there's Charles Bullock. And of course I had to say something. I think I said, hey, I have your book, The Arms Race. I didn't know what to say, but I wanted to say something.
Yeah, that's funny. That's hilarious. Far out. But I think it shows you like as well. So from your standpoint, you're saying like there's not really one person, but it's kind of, it sounds like just your continued search for knowledge has kind of, gotten you around a multitude of people that have helped craft you into the person that you are today.
Yeah. And I want to show a little bit of love to Lane. Like Lane is somebody I've known for probably 15 years. And I'm in awe of his ability to just focus, his work ethic, his ability to communicate. Like, so that's somebody, and again, I'm older than Lane. But that's somebody now and I also mentioned you, like I could have gone into partnerships with a lot of people in the last 10 years and I always talk to my wife and no. And you and Lane, because, and I met you through Lane, this was the first yes in my professional career of saying, yes, I trust these people. So I would say you learning just from the business. And again, I appreciate where you started from in the trenches, in the gym. And then just kind of, I look at it as kind of like you layered. Like, I don't know if you had this grand vision from day one. I imagine it kind of.
No, I tell people, like, I was actually having some reflection the other day. In the last 10 years, it was kind of 10 years ago, I was still working as a trainer. I had my own gym by that standpoint. And I had about 30 plus kind of trainers working with me in that gym. But like if you told me 10 years ago that I would have an education company that is educating 50,000 plus students a year, that wasn't on the vision. I think one thing I've told people, I know Lane has had a similar kind of experience. It's just like, I've always just tried to be the best person that I could be at that stage of my life. So if that stage of my life I was a coach, then I was going to do everything that I could to be the best coach and serve my clients. And you made a very good point before. It's like if you're serving your clients and getting results, all of the other stuff will come, right? If you're doing it from a place of, making sure that you're using the science and the evidence to, use that as a foundation, but then also having enough, I think, emotional intelligence to ebb and flow as a coach and not to be afraid to try things as long as they're kind of within the confounds of being logical. Mm-hmm. So it's that. And look, I appreciate that, brother, because I think it's, from my end, meeting you and kind of going through the journey that we had the last few years, it's not something that I take lightly. I had a catch up with one of, my other partners this morning. So it's like, I'm very grateful for being able to connect with like-minded people. And I think like when you have the like-minded connection, to use the term at the top, on the product, as we have, from you, Lane, and myself, that filters down into the community of people that you're bringing into it. So I might actually touch base on this now with PCA. There's a few other things I want to get into today. Like you mentioned that before, Physique Coaching Academy, that is, the mentoring program that we've created. Like for someone that's just listening right now, they know of you, they know of Lane, they know of Clean Health, but they don't know of PCA. Like, in your words, what problem is that solving for fitness professionals out there?
So when we say PCA, it's Physique Coaching Academy. And I think the problem that it solves is if somebody is geared towards evidence-based, what Physique Coaching Academy will do is it gives you all of the nutrition philosophies that Lane and I have developed, all of the training, resistance training, aerobic exercise, and it's all couched in research. So what it does is it kind of spoon feeds you the evidence in I don't know how are there any other word, in an outstanding learning type module that is beautiful, which is that's what you guys do. So it's beautiful graphics, engaging, high quality video. So that's what I would say. Like if you want evidence-based, Physique Coaching Academy is the course that we've invested in. And again, a lot of people don't know, we were working on content for that for over 2 years before we launched the course. I mean, it's dense. And then the other thing, and again, there's a theme here, it's evidence-based, but we teach you, I actually just posted about this yesterday. We teach you how to read research, critically analyze, interpret research. And because that skill is because, Physique Coaching Academy is going to end for people after 8 months. So they're going to be professionals relying on the knowledge that they got, but we want them to be lifelong learners. And we feel like we've given them the skill to now read research. And also there's research. We actually have quizzes in our course where you have to read research studies and then we quiz you on it. And we want to instill that skill set so that 5 years, 10 years later, you're still able to read research and critically analyze it and apply it to serve your clients. So in 2 words, Physique Coaching Academy, what it delivers is evidence-based exercise and nutrition.
Definitely. And I think probably the other added bonus that I've found, I think we both have, like having the weekly community calls where we're all jumping on with the students. That really, I think, has like 10x the whole experience, because I think it gives students the opportunity to go and do the online course, go and learn the research, go and learn the theory, but then come into a group environment where they can ask questions, do additional learning, and learn how to practically apply it. I think that's the secret sauce, because a lot of online to be honest, not a lot. Pretty much every online course, it's here's the course, jump in, buy, do the course. With us, it's jump in, do the course, but now jump into the community and let's connect, let's engage, let's mentor, and let's nurture along that journey.
Yeah, and that's the mentorship aspect of what we do. And also that kind of handles the application part of it, because a lot of what we get are people, hey, I have this client and they're struggling with this. What is the group's thought? So now now we can chime in. And I love when I see our students answering the questions. Like, don't wait for you and me and Lane all the time, because our students are 100%. Experienced. And some of these students that we have, they're already the top 1% of trainers in the world. Like, I see some of the names. And
we've got I tell people we've got like everyone from beginners up to PhDs in there, right? So we're getting a very high caliber, but it comes back to, I think setting the intention and what we do from creating the structure and then attracting the right people into it. But I want to kind of link into some of the stuff that we teach in there. I want to jump into like programming, right? And I think one of the questions, I get asked, and I'm sure you get asked this, is like, Daine, if I only had 3 hours a week to train, what exercise modality or method, i.e. aerobic work, weight training, should I invest that time into, and why should I do that?
So I would follow up with one clarification question. If somebody came to me, I would ask, what is your primary goal? If your primary goal is to change the shape of your body, to optimize your body composition, or to enhance your physique, my answer would be resistance training. If you had 3 hours per week, you would resistance train. Now, of course, I would also try to sell some aerobic activity along with that, not only for body fat reduction, but also for all of the health benefits that. Well,
let's look at it. I think, look at it from, I think most people these days, and even myself included now, like, heading, in my 40s, like you, I think, when I go and, pick the kids up from school and whatnot, obviously with my background in health and fitness and training for 20 plus years, I'm in a very small percentage of, I guess, parents that are there that are into their fitness. The average person looking at quality of life, looking at, cosmetic appearance and how they feel, how they look. Like, talk to us about your stock, your prescription there and why.
Yeah. So I've always if the conversation goes to anti-aging or enhancing your quality of life, because I get asked that a lot in just different groups. I've always said this: resistance training is the best anti-aging drug you will ever take. Now, of course, it's not a drug, but you can look at that through two ways. One is just my eyes, just in as I look at the world. And when I see people that are aging, middle-aged and older, and they look young, they look vibrant. They're always lifting weights. There's something about weightlifting that keeps the body younger. Now, I don't want to upset anybody, but I would say people that only run, they actually look older to me. And again, that's just my observation. If they're only
I'd second that. The example I used to give people is like, look at an Olympic sprinter, a medaled Olympic sprinter, and then look at a medaled 15-kilometer runner.
Yeah.
You can have two of them at 30 years old. The sprinter will look like a savage, like puma or a lion, you know what I mean? Like young, athletic, they're 30 looking 20. The long distance runner will be 30 looking 40, gray hair, skinny, meek. I don't know. Like I always looked at it like there's just so much oxidative stress attached to that whole kind of training. Like what are your thoughts on that? Like, hearing that example.
Yeah, I've never even thought about like what's the physiological rationale for it. It very well could be oxidative stress, because there's a lot of oxidative free radical production with aerobic exercise. Yeah. You do that day after day, week after week, month after month. But I am always amazed at just looking out into a group of people, and that again, and I'm the kind of person. What's that?
The eye test. I like it.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm the kind of person, I'll go up to people. If I see like a fit woman who's, a little, middle-aged or older, I'm like, hey, just what do you do? And I always couch it with, hey, I'm an exercise scientist, so I'm not coming across as a creep. But and my wife's with me half the time when I do. Yeah. But I'm naturally curious, and it's the eye test and the confirmation is that. And here's something else I've learned too, in my lab. When I see a naturally lean woman and a woman 40s, 50s, even into 60s, I've seen this a few times. They're naturally lean. There's three things that they all do. The first is they eat a high amount of protein. The protein levels are high.
What are you classifying as high protein?
Well, yeah, that's true. They're eating more typically than 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So when I say high, these women are high, and they're just naturally lean. And the other thing is they exercise nearly every day, both resistance exercise and aerobic exercise. They're highly active. Usually resistance training is kind of the foundation of what they do. But I noticed that because I don't know if there may not be somebody on this earth that has done more resting metabolic rate tests than I. If there are, there's only a few of them on this earth, because I've done thousands and thousands of these tests. And again, typically these females that have this look, they're also their metabolic rates are elite. It's just high. So they're lean. And again, I know now that goes back to protein protein just has a high turnover in the body, which causes your metabolism to be elevated.
So what I'm hearing from this is and look, a lot of trainers that might be listening to this, or even just Gen Pop, like trainers are generally training people kind of over the age of 35 to 60, right? Unless they're working with athletes or physique competitors, a lot of the time they're working with Gen Pop. So you're saying, from your experience, it's like from an eye test perspective, weight training seems to be a quality of life, physique and longevity variable, but then also scientifically, that's one of the key characteristics that you found in healthier populations as they age.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
And okay. I'll say this, for people that work with general population, and you're starting with clientele that it's difficult to get them to resistance train. There's a simple, we can call it a hack, a simple hack you can do that will change their body composition without having them diet at all. All you do is have them increase their protein and decrease carbs or fat, it doesn't matter. That alone, and I can give you 3 human studies, plus I used to be in the trenches, not as much as you, but I used to be in the trenches. It's amazing what just simply increasing protein, if you do nothing else, what that does to somebody's body.
I used to, it was one of the hacks that I used to do with clients, and we used to do it through our gyms. The first 2 weeks, we wouldn't change anything in their food. We would just give them a protein target.
Yes.
And so we would just give, and generally for most people, like, the women that you were talking about, they might be coming in on 40 to 50 grams of protein per day because they were just so used to consuming carbs. We would just say, I would like you to double this for 2 weeks. So take it up to about 100, 120 grams of protein. Now, yes, with some of them, you'd have stool motility issues and things like that because they are so used to not consuming that much protein. But by the end of 2 weeks, just from touching their protein, and even if they'd only trained 3 times a week, they would have a 4 to 5 pound body composition change, generally a reduction. Now, yes, some of that might be water weight and whatnot, but they would start to see visible changes, if anything, just in their face. And so that would be motivating from a compliance perspective for them to be like, wow, okay, if I've just changed that, if all I've done is change my protein and I've started to get a shift for the first time in a year or years, now I'm going to listen to you as a coach.
Yeah, and that particular type of client that was eating so low, those are the type of people that see the biggest improvements from simply increasing it. When you have somebody that's eating a very low protein and that's what they change, it's again, that's the biggest. You'll have the largest changes in what you just said in a 2-week time period. Those are quick changes.
So when it comes to weight training, and I think a lot of times people overcomplicate the process, right? They want to look at rest periods, sets, tempo, intensity exercises, drop sets, cluster training, blah, 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 blah. Like you could go on and on and on and on, right? But like for a step one, and again, 70%, if not more, of most people either listening to this or trainers, it's going to be general population. What are some key variables that you will look at when it comes to crafting a weight training program for a client?
Yeah, so one thing I'll say is our students in Physique Coaching Academy will know this, and they'll have all of the scientific references that validate what I'm about to say. But I use an acronym that's very simple. It's called LEAF and LEAF. Very simple. And the reason I like that is it helps me to remember it. So the one is load. So let's just go through them. There's load, there's effort, there is frequency, and then there's the amount. So let's spend 30 seconds on each of them. In terms of load, if you're trying to maximize your muscle mass, it doesn't matter if you lift with heavy weights or light weights. As long as the second one is E for effort, some people will call that intensity. Doesn't matter if you lift with heavy weights or lighter weights, as long as your effort is close to failure. So as long as you're near failure on all of your sets, let's say within 2 to 3 repetitions of failure, it doesn't matter if your weights are heavy or light. Now, if your goal is to maximize your strength, it does matter. You have to lift with heavy weights. If your goal is to maximize your strength. So, and then we have amount. So a lot of people will refer to that as volume. So far we talked about how heavy or light should the weights be? How hard should we be lifting during our sets? And now what's the amount? What's the volume that we should do? And the volume aspect of this is not as much as what most people think. As long as you have your effort in check, that you're going to near failure on all of your sets, you don't need high amounts of volume. So I'm in this space, and I'm seeing some data from a colleague, and basically this study, it's one of the best designed studies on volume. Once you get past about 3 sets, and this has already been reported in some other papers, But once you get past about 3 sets, you're not getting much. The rate of diminishing returns is highly prevalent after 3 sets, 3 hard sets. And then the last one, frequency. How often should I stimulate my glutes, my shoulders, my biceps? And the answer to that is, based on the evidence that we have, we know that 1 time per week is not enough. So you need to hit each body part more than once per week. What we don't know is 2 better than 4? Is 5 better than 3? All of the research that compares how often we should hit each body part, it's kind of, there's not a consensus yet. The only consensus we can say is, if you're only hitting chest once per week, that is not ideal. It needs to be at least twice. But again, if you want to lift 4 times per week per body part, research would suggest that's not any better or worse than 2 times. The only thing we want to stay away from is just 1 time per week. So those are the 4 variables that you at least need to be considering when you're doing your resistance training program. How much weight, what's the intensity, and the volume.
Yeah, that's awesome information. And I want to unpack some of that stuff just to deep dive a little bit more for the listeners. And we'll come back to load. So if we're looking at, and the way I traditionally interpret load is percentage of 1RM.
Okay, we can use that.
That's where my mind automatically goes, right or wrong. Now, if we're looking at load for, say, fat loss, I know for strength and power, definitely the percentage of 1RM or the intensity is going to definitely go up. From my experience, it really needs to be over 88% to get any kind of profound neurological changes with more intermediate to advanced clientele. But what type of load, like if we're looking at that variable first, what type of load are we thinking? Like for a general fat loss hypertrophy client, because ultimately they're the same, right? Like you're building muscle, which increases RMR and all that type of stuff and drops body comp over time. What percentage would you be thinking?
So I'm gonna suggest a percentage of 1RM that's probably around 80%. So if I say 80%, where does your mind go in terms of how many reps would they be able to complete?
Look, 80%, 8 out of 10, kind of anywhere from 8 to 12 reps.
Okay. So the reason I like that range is because when we look at the mechanism of muscle hypertrophy, we have 2 main things driving this. The first one is mechanical tension. So we want to get as much tension on these myofibrils, these actin and myosin fibrils. So tension, we get that with load. The other thing that impacts or that has a role in the mechanism of muscle hypertrophy is something called metabolic stress. So think of this as essentially a lack of oxygen supply to the muscle.
So could I interpret that as tension and time?
Yeah, I love that actually. Yeah, so tension and time.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing more reps, that set's going to last longer.
Yeah.
Now, I would caution against purposefully trying to go very, very slow on your concentric portion. I can get into that if you want. But the metabolic stress, think of that as the more reps you do in a set, and you're getting that lactic acid. So lactic acid is essentially you don't have enough oxygen to take on these electrons, and eventually that lactate is formed. So this 8 to 12 repetition range, or this 75 to 80 to 85% of 1RM, what that's doing is that's allowing us to kind of hit the sweet spot where we're getting the benefits of relatively heavy weights. That's the mechanical tension part of this.
Yeah.
But it's allowing us to do enough repetitions where we're also tapping into this metabolic stress compartment of the mechanism of muscle hypertrophy. So it's the sweet spot. So in Physique Coaching Academy, we suggest the majority of your training should be in that 80% or 8 to 12 repetition range. And then if for nothing else other than to prevent just boredom or for psychological reasons, have some days where you're lifting heavier loads and some days where you're actually going lighter. And again, now not just for psychological benefit, but now we are we're leaning into the mechanical tension part of this, let's say 20% of the time. And then the other maybe 20% of the time, we're leaning into this metabolic stress. So we're covering all bases. And I would say I've done multiple resistance training studies in my research lab, and we've gotten the best muscle hypertrophy results when we do a 60%, 80% 1RM or 8 to 12 rep range, and then 20% heavier weights, 85 to 90, 95% of 1RM. And then the other 20% of the time, 70, 75% of 1RM, when we're getting about 15 to 20 reps in a given set. Always training to near failure. That's got to be kind of a prerequisite.
So with that, I mean, that approach is almost like an undulating periodization approach, where you're going through periods of higher time with moderate to high tension, and then you're going through, and this could even be on a weekly basis, like where you're kind of, at least from what I'm interpreting, where you have periods where the tension goes up but the time reduces.
Yeah. If you want to get crazy, this could even be intra workout, where your first set after your warm up is heavy. Second, third set gets lighter and lighter. So yes, typically a lot of people use this daily undulating periodization where, like you were saying, weekly, we're going to have, hey, this workout today, we're going to lean into the heavy load. The next workout for that body part, we're going to lean into the moderate or the 80% 1RM. So,
well, that's what I think all the West Side barbell guys, they used to kind of integrate that into like a conjugate method where, they'd have those high and low intensity days alternating, week in, week out, the late great Louis Simmons.
Yes. Yeah. And if I were to challenge somebody, if when you're designing your resistance training for muscle hypertrophy, just think about this. And I think this kind of makes things easier. You want every workout to maximize the muscle protein synthetic response. And what does that? Well, what does that is training to near failure is the most important thing. So whether you're doing 1 set or 10 sets, train to near failure, get that intensity. Because when you're near failure, what you're doing is you're activating the most motor units. As your lower threshold motor units become fatigued based on the motor unit recruitment, we know that you keep recruiting newer and higher threshold motor units. So if you're going to failure, you're recruiting as many motor units as you can during that set. And the only motor units that are going to be stimulated for hypertrophy are those that are actually activated. So again, if you do nothing else, have your clients train to near failure on each set. You can be a pretty bad programmer, but if you do that, you're covering you're covering your muscle hypertrophy stimulus aspect of that workout.
You mentioned there about the higher threshold motor units, right? And they're obviously generally related to your type 2B or type 2A, fast twitch units. Is that kind of part of your reason for concentrically why you're not an advocate of slow movement? Like, are you getting more activation of those units concentrically if you're being more explosive in the movement pattern?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm about to explain something. It's mostly theoretical, but I can point to muscle biopsy studies looking at glycogen depletion to support this. So when you lift explosively as you can, you are now stimulating the the muscle fibers, the type 2A, type 2B muscle fibers, type 2X, that have the greatest capacity for hypertrophy. So I think explosive. Now, just because you're lifting explosively doesn't mean that the weight is moving fast, because if the weight's heavy, it's still moving slow. But as explosive as you can move that weight, you are exactly what you said. You're recruiting the motor units that are the most adaptable for hypertrophy, the type 2 muscle fibers. Now, what I like to do is explosive on the concentric, and then controlled on the eccentric. Now, whether that's 2 seconds, 5 seconds, but I like to take momentum out of it. And the research that I rely on here is I don't like EMG studies. EMG is highly variable. It's only the surface muscle motor units that are even being sampled. But when you take muscle biopsies and you look at glycogen depletion, these explosive concentric movements will deplete the glycogen in these type 2 muscle fibers. Okay. The only way you're going to deplete glycogen in a muscle fiber is if that muscle fiber was stimulated or activated. So we know we're hitting them, not from EMG studies, although EMG studies would generally suggest that they are, but I rely on the best data, which is muscle glycogen depletion. So explosive and to near failure. You're doing everything you can to stimulate type 2 motor units. And one other thought on this, a little bit of a direction change, but for people who are interested in let's just call it anti-aging, I think the best types of exercise that should be in everybody's program is explosive movements, plyometrics. And here's what I tell my students. If you want to see what happens as we age, a great place, and it's a sad place, but hospital or kidney dialysis, just look at older individuals, and there's something you'll notice about everybody who ages not well. They're slow. And we know that sarcopenia, for lack of a better word, attacks type 2 muscle fibers. Those are the muscle fibers that atrophy the most. So if we can have people doing explosive jumps, push-ups where you're clapping, medicine ball throws, again, as soon as I'm done with my current program, I am going to make sure that I'm doing this stuff. I'm currently not, because I'm going to do it because you just triggered, like, I know this. I'm like, fuck, I have not been doing, like, obviously, whenever I'm lifting, I always used to cue as a coach concentrically, like, let's just say I'm doing a bench, like punch. Imagine you're throwing a punch with the weight in your hand. Like, so I'm setting the intention to go bang. Yes.
But definitely the plyo stuff and that, like, what about things like contrast training where you're doing, like, do you have an opinion on that? Where you're doing maybe an 6-8 rep dumbbell bench, and then you go straight in, like, have a 30-second, 60-minute rest and go into some sort of explosive stuff. Do you like that? Or are you feeling like you need to separate that so the muscle's not pre-fatigued prior to doing it?
I haven't done any research on contrast training. I like that for explosive type movements, for sure. So for an athlete who needs to be explosive, but just like you said, anything that you can do, even in like you said, your bench pressing, that anything explosive is going to preserve these type 2, or at least stimulate them. And again, just look at older people. They're slow. Everything about them is slow. Yeah. And I need to do a better job of educating, just, in my world, because I get a lot of people that are 40s, 50s, 60s. Include these things in your workouts. It makes physiological sense.
I love that. It's really kind of triggered some stuff for me on that point. Just actually on the topic of, like, effort. Like, there's a lot of different ways to measure, effort, RPE, your RIR. Like, how do you determine failure or close to failure? Because I think sometimes people's perception of what they can achieve compared to what they actually can achieve, like, it can be quite a hard line to figure out. Like, what would be your advice, like, to actually determining what failure is and whether or not you're pushing close enough to it?
Yeah, I think a way to solve this problem, and I get that a lot, like, people don't know because they're new or they're weak. It's like, well, once a month, go to failure. Choose your weight and go to you can't lift it anymore. Because what that does, that calibrates what you can do for the next 4 weeks until you test it again. So I call them test days.
I love it.
And every month you do a test day, because it takes out a lot of this, well, I don't know. No, you do know. At least you knew what it was on that day. So if I'm doing 65-pound dumbbell bench press, and I'm okay, today's a test day. I'm going to go to, I cannot complete another repetition, at least concentrically. And I'd say I did 12 reps. Okay. So next week, when I do 65-pound dumbbells, I know if I'm not getting at least 10 or 11 reps, I'm coming up short of what I believe I can do. Now, I can also appreciate some days we just don't have it. And other days we really got it. But it's still that test day philosophy about every month. It's fine tuning your system where you're never going to be that far off.
No, I love it. So I think, two key takeaways for me so far with what we've discussed, just in terms of like quality of life, lifestyle, and all that, is obviously high protein. That's a key variable that you've found with a lot of people that you've done research on, or just from the eye test. And then weight training, and then kind of linking in with that weight training is trying to integrate into that some explosive work. The next layer to that is like aerobic training. Like, I have a saying, and I'd love to get your, I guess, scientific take on it. And it used to be to our clients is, when you go to a restaurant, you generally go, like, sure, you might be going for the dessert, but you're generally going for the main course. The main course is the big meal. And so my analogy was, weight training is like the main course, cardio is like the entree, and then maybe things like Pilates, yoga, and whatnot are the dessert, right? So using that analogy, like, how would you, and I know it's general because it can be dependent on goal, but in terms of like order of importance, we talk about it when we talk about macros. First is protein, and then, carbs, fats, like pick your poison. When it comes to aerobic work, where does that sit in the scheme of things when it comes to optimizing health, body composition, quality of life for you?
Yeah, and understand, I'm a fat loss researcher, so I see the world, and I see every body that I ever look at. I see adipose tissue or the lack thereof. It's just how I'm wired. So I always have that bias. So I'll approach this from a body composition perspective. First, I would say, even though the question is aerobic, the heartbeat that never changes is resistance training is going to be the foundation of this body composition, what I call a physique lifestyle. So that's going to be a staple. And then I look at, there's going to be periods of time where aerobic exercise or cardio is going to be more, less. I like to think that, if nothing else, a step count is just always going to be part of what we do. So getting outside if you can, trying to get some sunlight. So doing steps is going to be your base. And then let me ask you on that point though, why? Why is steps? Why is getting out in the sun? I mean, obviously there's that feel good things, but like, for those that are, want the science, why is that important? Yeah. And I need to preface this. This is not my area of expertise. Yeah. I have done some reading on this. The reading that I've done is sunlight helps you sleep better in that night. So if you get X amount of sunlight, or if you don't get sunlight, you don't sleep as well. And then the second thing is being outdoors helps with anxiety. And again, this is where I'm just going to say, I've read that research. I've read it enough to know that I purposefully try to get I haven't been on a treadmill in years because I want to be outdoors. I can't go into 12 layers of this, and this, but the research that I've read has convinced me I want to be outdoors and I want to try to get sunlight for my aerobic activity. Because
I would challenge anyone anyway. It's like, have you ever gone outside when it's sunny and gone for a walk, whether it's in the bush, the beach, or whatever, and felt worse than being inside?
Yeah, right.
Like I don't need the science necessarily to tell me that. Like I know intuitively how I'm going to feel.
Yes. And we can also get into vitamin D synthesis as well, which that's actually a problem for a lot of people. A lot of people don't realize it. And then one other aspect of this, we're all resistance training. Well, that's an indoor activity. So we're all, that's an hour a day for a lot of us that we're not going to be outside. So then back to the cardio again, periods of time where it's going to be higher and lower, higher and lower. I just base it on if you're in a fat loss phase, aerobic activity is a really good stimulus for fat loss. So when you're trying to lose body fat, I would suggest you add in cardio to your resistance exercise. If you're not in a fat loss phase, you're just doing your base cardio, which I think for a lot of people could just be steps and walking. But again, cardio there's so much other health that I like to say that I sneak in the back door that's above and beyond just fat loss. And one of the main things there is just like insulin sensitivity, metabolic health, depression. And here's something I learned when I was doing the Physique Coaching Academy. This has really changed my thinking on cardio. So we have a whole module on aerobic exercise. And something that I didn't know before I did my prep for Physique Coaching Academy was I didn't know that aerobic exercise regulates appetite. So the people who are generally, they have excess adiposity, so they're obese. If you look at one of the reasons why, there's two things. They don't have a hunger shut off while they're eating, and they're also hungry after they ate. So we would call that a dysregulated appetite controller. It's just dysregulated hunger cues. Aerobic exercise at a low level, it regulates appetite such that you stop eating when you're full and you're not hungry after you eat. So one of the best things, and we don't have research on resistance training for this. I'm a big resistance training guy. But if you start with a client, or here's something I would consider. If I have a new client who's never exercised before, they struggle with being overweight, I would strongly consider just saying, we're gonna ask you to walk, and we're gonna try to regulate your appetite just through aerobic activity. So if anybody's curious, I think that's module 4 in Physique Coaching Academy. All of the science on that is in there. Leeds University did a massive study. This goes back to some landmark studies that they did in the 1950s, looking at office workers versus construction workers, and just how much their appetites were dysregulated versus being active, how it regulated their appetites.
Let's translate some of that. So coming back to steps, like, do you have a particular guideline if we're looking at steps from a baseline for just human health, use that blanket term, what is your baseline?
So the research that I've read on this pretty much always takes me back to the same number, and that's 7,000 steps a day. I went into that research thinking, it's 10,000 steps. It's not 10,000 steps. I couldn't find justification for 10,000 steps. Now, 10,000 steps is better, but a goal for most people would be 7,000 steps, and that seems to be like this break point where you get a lot of these health benefits.
So 7,000 is kind of like just maintenance, general health. 10,000 might be if you were strategically trying to optimize your body comp, in particular your fat loss. I would agree. And for somebody like me, like I'm behind a desk a lot. My workouts are typically resistance training. It's an effort for me to get 7,000 steps. That's not natural for me. I'm the same. I have to strategically go out for a walk every day, and I find I'm a fast walker. Everyone is like, far out, you walk fast. But me walking fast, 30 minutes is about 5,500 to 6,000 steps.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. So then I obviously, on top of just being around the house, it'll get me to between 8,000 to 10,000 a day. But I need to, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize. That's why I love, Apple Watches, just to give me, might not be 100% accurate, but it's going to give me a more accurate step count than if I was just carrying my phone, is that people overestimate the amount of incidental exercise or steps they get on a day-to-day basis, especially people like you or I who are stuck in front of a computer for 6, 7, 8+ hours a day. It's nigh impossible to get over 3,000 steps unless you actively, concertedly go out and try and do it, from my experience.
Yeah, and mine as well.
And then the other thing you mentioned about aerobic work and cardio. Now, obviously, there's so many ways you can get into this. You can go into LISS, HIIT, etc. But if we're looking at, say, maintenance cardio and fat loss cardio, maintenance cardio, obviously, we're doing the steps, right? 8,000 steps a day. What would be the cherry on top in terms of, let's just say I've got 5 times a week that I can train, and I'm going to do 3 of those are on resistance training. The other 2, if they were cardio, what would that look like from a guidelines perspective?
I'm going to give my practical answer. That should be whatever the heck you're going to do.
Very scientific.
Yes. If you love high intensity interval training, then do that. If you love just going out for a nice little light jog where you can talk with your partner and have a conversation, do that. There's a lot of people that are just don't like aerobic activity. So I just want to say, whatever you do it. Obviously, if it's lower intensity, you got to do it for longer to burn fat. It all burns fat. And it is a potent stimulus for fat loss. If you look at what I always study bodybuilders. What do bodybuilders do when they do contest prep? They do a lot of cardio, typically. Now, not all of them, but a lot of them are doing cardio. And it could just be, 10, 15,000 steps. Some of them are taking that approach. But in every published case study, except for one, and I'm talking about 12 published case studies, approximately equal between males and females, 11 out of the 12 used additional cardio to get this stage lean. So I always say bodybuilders, they're the experts in fat loss.
Look, I love today's chat, even if for a selfish reason for me, because you've triggered 3 things for me today already. Definitely, I probably haven't been eating as much protein as I need to. The second thing is that my weight training has probably been not as explosive as it could be. So throwing in some more plyo stuff and whatnot to activate those high threshold motor units, because I have no intention of being old and slow. And then the third thing is obviously the appetite control benefits from cardio. Again, I think that's something that, just even when the stuff can skip the mind, we often think of cardio of increasing insulin sensitivity or making me feel better from the endorphin rush. But I think the appetite regulation, especially, if you're a busy person dealing with a lot of stress, it can be quite easy to compensate and eat emotionally.
Yes. Yeah. Now I would think if you're getting 6,000, 7,000 steps or more per day, I think the research was on people who were sedentary. Yeah. Their appetites are whacked. It's sad.
What are your actually on that? You triggered something. I find for me, as I've gone into more of a corporate role within my career, so obviously 10 years ago, half my time was spent as a trainer, half of my time was spent in business. Obviously, these days, it's 150% of my time is spent in business in a role that is definitely more demanding on my brain, right? So for people that are I guess, in high either academic, stressful or analytical type roles where the primary kind of thing that they're using every day is their brain, is there a link between because I'll give you an example, right? You could have a tradesman that is a builder or carpenter, and the majority of their day is spent through a physical exertion, right? So they're physically exerting themselves to move bricks or to lay things. They're having to make some calculations a little bit on the fly, but not too much. Maybe that's 20% of the day. For someone that's a CEO, a general manager, a head of department or something like that, it's the reverse, right? 80% of their time is spent in an analytical state. It's assessing numbers, performance, how can I optimize things. Is there a difference in energy requirements, for maybe nutritional or lifestyle requirements for someone that is in that type of role?
And I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did. Intuitively, I would think we don't burn as many calories with an intellectual activity, but I think it's a lot more than what we would think, if that makes sense. But I'm speaking on very time-laden reading that I've done on this years ago. So I don't have an answer, at least one that's not just my opinion.
Definitely. Well, coming into that, and I kind of want to touch base on a few things before we wrap up, and staying on, I think, the lifestyle theme, because I think that's something that you translate really well. Like, there's a lot of people out there these days saying you need 6 hours sleep, 7 hours sleep, 8 hours sleep, whatever it is, like, to function optimally. Like, when it comes to sleep and its impact on general health, body composition, longevity, what is your opinion on it and why?
So my answer to this goes back to the same preparation and work that I've done with step counts, meaning that I haven't done sleep studies, but I've done enough reading of the research, and talking to a lot of coaches in the space that deal with fat loss. And I always come back to the number of 7 hours per night. So for most people, 7 hours per night. Now, when I have discussed that, I have people who say, I only get 3 hours per night and I'm fine. And what I learned is there's, 1 out of 200,000 people that has a genetic mutation where they just don't need to sleep. So
sounds like my wife.
Is it real? Is it really?
Yeah, like, obviously mum with kids, breastfeeding and all that type of stuff. But like, she'll sleep anywhere between 3 to 5 hours a night and function properly. Now, if I do that, I'm not functioning at the same level. So I find for me, definitely I'm not a big believer in saying, if I get this much sleep, this will happen to me. But I've generally found for me, 100%, my sweet spot is 7 hours.
Yep. And that's what the research would suggest for most people. I do remember when I was first educated on this guy, I think he was from Malaysia. He was saying, I get 3 hours per night. And he's actually a physician. And he goes, I spent years trying to find medicine, trying to do anything with my lifestyle to get more sleep. And he goes, and I function fine. And then I realized, he got genetic testing, and he has this genetic anomaly where he doesn't need to sleep more. So all of those efforts were kind of wasted on him, because he functions just like I do on 7 or 8 hours. He functions on 3. And he goes, it was a relief to know that. Now, again, that was the exception, but I remember learning that and then doing some more additional reading, and it's a thing. So I do that because I think some people might be forcing themselves to get 7 hours when they're perfectly fine with 5 or 6. And if anything, I probably need a little bit more than 7. And one thing I learned about myself, if I'm sleep deprived for several days in a row, I get a cold every time. So
was that self-awareness piece. So now look, I want to wrap up on a few kind of fireside questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say a few statements, and I want you to respond with what first comes to mind. Okay. All right. So first one, who inspires you and why?
All right. First one that came to my mind was my wife. She inspires me because she allows me to be the best version of myself. And what I mean by that, and people might not like this, but my wife handles everything. I work, and that's all I do. So I always jokingly say, I don't know if we have millions of dollars or if we're penniless, because she handles everything. Yeah. I haven't written a check in years. She fixes stuff.
You know what? I interpret that as you're very aligned with your vision as a family unit, but you're also a team.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean? You're a team, because like you're handling one part of the business of life, and she's handling the other part of the business of life, and you have complete trust and transparency with that. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, and if I'm going to be honest, when I do venture into her world, it's never a good thing. I don't do it very well. I think she's also happy that that I focus on work. But yeah, and she does all the stuff that I just hate doing, like invoices and all that stuff.
Teamwork makes the dream work. The next comment: the fitness industry in 2030.
I would say tailored. I would say specific to the individual. So just a lot more individualized programming, nutrition. Maybe by that point, the genetic testing will have progressed enough where we can
take it seriously.
Be more precise in what will allow somebody to adapt better. So I just see it as being more individualized.
What would you, on a personal level, and this could be in business, it could be as a husband, as a father, whatever it is, what would you like to get better at?
Marketing.
Okay. Why?
I love what I do as a scientist. I love it, but marketing is just like it's just like it's my release. It's my pleasure reading. So I read a book by, Alex Hormozi, just finished the first book that he wrote. I'm finally getting into Russell Brunson's works, some of his books. I think you have been trained. You've done this in your sleep, I think. Dan Kennedy with some of his like copywriting stuff. So that stuff is just the business part of fitness. It's not in my DNA because I'm a scientist and that's where my skill set is. But I just like learning about marketing.
Definitely. Happiness. What is it to you?
I'm a Christian, so I believe in God, and happiness to me is just being appreciative and I'm reading a book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes, and what I'm learning, and King Solomon, the third king of Israel, so David's son, he wrote this, and he was the wealthiest man at that time. People from all over the known world were coming to him for advice. So he was the wealthiest and the wisest person of that time. And one of the things that he emphasizes in his book called Ecclesiastes is there are people who can accumulate a lot of wealth, and that is what he calls vanity. That's basically meaningless. What's really meaningful is if God allows you to enjoy the efforts of your work. So for whatever reason, I work hard, and I'm so blessed. I actually enjoy it. Like just our venture with Physique Coaching Academy. Like I just sit back and I'm like, I'm enjoying it. We're influencing
being appreciative and grateful for anything and everything, no matter what it is. And just, I think it allows you to live more in the moment.
Yes. And I don't want to throw out a country, but if I was born in Haiti or...
Oh yeah. Well, look at what's going on there at the moment.
Yes. Well, I could be the same person, but you have nothing. Like there's nothing to. I don't.
Look, we see it in Physique Coaching Academy. With some of our students that are in countries that aren't democratic per se, right? And just the struggles that they have to live in a day-to-day kind of like. I think if you're in the States, Canada, Australia, England, New Zealand, we got it good. We've got it fucking great. Like, we've got electricity on. We, can speak our opinion, although, it has gotten worse in recent years. Which is another whole can of worms. But like the reality is we are blessed. That's for sure.
Yes. And that is scary too. The whole being, that scares me. That
the erosion of civil liberties. Oh yeah, definitely. I think like, America right now is at the forefront of this with everything that's gone on the last few years. It's good to see, not to get too political, I could get it, but it's good to see, emerging new candidates and stuff like that, and kind of, potentially some change coming over the next 12, 18 months in the States. Because I think at the end of the day, America sets the tone for the world, and it should, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What does I guess my last question actually is, what's next for you, Bill? Like, so, over the next 12 months, where's your focus? Where's your intention? What are you focusing on?
The area that I see myself, the next mountain that I want to scale is the aging female. So the female going into menopause, the whole hormonal milieu, HRT. I'm when I do posts on this, or when I speak about this,
it's in demand. People want it. Yeah.
And it seems like the fitness industry, for whatever reason, the aging female is just ignored. And that's just my impression. I don't know what it is, but I have too many stories of women that have been fit, that exercise, and they go into menopause and nothing works anymore. It does not matter. They're gaining weight, but they're fit. They track their food.
We used to experience it in our gyms, and with the hundreds of thousands of coaching sessions. So I think it's definitely lead the charge on it. I think especially our students in the Physique Coaching Academy would love that.
Yeah. So I see that being my next frontier, but I'm already thinking about the how I'm going to add to the modules in Physique Coaching Academy over the next year, because I want to add more supplements to the supplement module. But at some point, I have an interest in that will be the next big thing for me.
Awesome. So for anyone living under a rock, where can they find more information about you, mate?
Two places. Best place is Instagram, and that is Bill Campbell, PhD. And also my website is billcampbellphd.com.
I appreciate that, brother. Well, look, thank you very much for your time today. It's awesome to chat with you as always. You've given me a few kind of reminders to go away and execute, mate. So, enjoy the rest of your evening and have an awesome day.
All right. Thank you.